The stars shimmered like scattered diamonds across the velvet expanse of space, their light casting faint reflections on the sleek hull of the interstellar vessel. Inside, the hum of advanced technology blended seamlessly with the quiet anticipation that hung in the air. Captain Elias Vera stood at the helm, his sharp features illuminated by the soft glow of holographic displays. He was a man who had seen too much and yet not enough, a paradox wrapped in the hardened exterior of someone who had spent decades navigating the unknown. His crew, though small, was as seasoned as they came, each member chosen for their unparalleled skill and unyielding resolve. But tonight, something felt different. The ship sensors had picked up an anomaly deep within the asteroid belt ahead, a signal unlike anything they'd encountered before. It wasn't mechanical or natural. It pulsed with an intelligence that defied explanation. As the crew gathered around the central console, their faces reflected both excitement and unease. This was what they lived for. The thrill of discovery, the chance to uncover secrets hidden in the vastness of the cosmos. Yet, there was an undercurrent of tension, a shared understanding that such discoveries often came at a price. Elias studied the readings carefully, his fingers tracing patterns on the translucent interface. "It's moving," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Whatever it is, it knows we're here." The words sent a ripple through the room, but no one spoke. They didn't need to. Each person aboard understood the gravity of the moment. They were about to step into territory where humanity had never ventured, where rules were unwritten and outcomes uncertain. As the ship adjusted its course toward the source of the signal, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would change everything. For all his years exploring the stars, he had always been driven by curiosity, by the desire to push boundaries and expand horizons. But now, as the anomaly grew closer, he realized this mission carried a weight far greater than scientific advancement or personal ambition. It felt inevitable, as though fate itself had conspired to bring them here. The crew exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of determination and apprehension. They were prepared for danger, for challenges beyond comprehension. What none of them could have anticipated, however, was how deeply this journey would intertwine their lives with forces beyond human understanding, and how profoundly it would alter the very fabric of their existence. The ship shuddered slightly as it navigated through the dense field of asteroids, each jagged rock casting eerie shadows against the viewport. The anomaly loomed larger now, a swirling mass of energy encased in a crystalline shell that seemed to pulse with life. Its surface refracted the starlight into dazzling hues, creating an ethereal dance of colors that mesmerized everyone aboard. Captain Elias ordered the ship to hover just outside its perimeter, cautious but unable to resist the magnetic pull of the unknown. "Prepare the landing pod," he commanded, his voice steady despite the knot tightening in his chest. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, strapping into suits designed for environments as hostile as this one promised to be. Elias led the team, stepping into the cramped pod alongside Dr. Lyra Solon, the ship's xenobiologist, and Jace Torin, their tactical specialist. The descent was silent save for the low hum of the engines, each heartbeat echoing louder than the last as they approached the alien structure. Touchdown was smooth, almost unnervingly so, given the chaotic environment surrounding them. As the hatch opened, a rush of cold air swept inside, carrying with it an otherworldly scent, sharp, metallic, and faintly floral. Stepping out onto the crystalline surface, Elias felt a strange vibration beneath his boots, as if the ground itself were alive. The anomaly towered above them, its pulsating glow casting shifting patterns across their visors. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly alien. Dr. Solon knelt to examine the surface, her gloved hands brushing against the translucent material. "It's organic," she whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "Some kind of bio-crystalline matrix. I've never seen anything like it." Before anyone could respond, the structure reacted. A fissure appeared along its base, widening slowly to reveal a chamber bathed in soft, golden light. Without hesitation, Elias gestured for the team to follow him inside. The interior was vast, cavernous, and filled with intricate formations that resembled frozen waves of liquid light. At its center stood a pedestal-like structure, atop which rested what appeared to be a cocoon made of the same crystalline material. As they approached, the cocoon began to shift, its surface rippling like water disturbed by a gentle breeze. Then, without warning, it cracked open. A figure emerged, slender and radiant, her form humanoid yet distinctly not. Her skin shimmered with iridescent tones, catching the light in ways that made her seem almost unreal. Long tendrils of silken hair cascaded down her back, glowing faintly as though infused with stardust. She regarded them with eyes that held galaxies within their depths, ancient and wise beyond measure. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. No one moved. No one spoke. The air between them crackled with an energy that was neither hostile nor welcoming but undeniably powerful. Finally, she stepped forward, her movements fluid and deliberate. When she spoke, her voice resonated in their minds rather than their ears, a symphony of harmonies that bypassed language entirely. "You have come," she said simply, her gaze locking onto Elias. There was something in her tone, an acknowledgement, perhaps even recognition, that sent a chill running down his spine. Before he could respond, she raised a hand, and the chamber around them dissolved into light. When the brilliance faded, they found themselves standing in a new space, one that defied logic and physics. Walls stretched infinitely upward, adorned with constellations that shifted and rearranged themselves constantly. Beneath their feet lay a mosaic of planets and moons, spinning lazily as though caught in some cosmic ballet. And there, suspended in the center of it all, floated the being they had encountered moments ago. She descended gracefully until she stood mere inches from Elias, her presence overwhelming yet oddly comforting. Reaching out, she placed a delicate hand on his chest, directly over his heart. The touch sent a jolt through him, not painful, but electrifying, as though she were reading his very soul. "You are not alone," she murmured, her voice softer now, almost intimate. "Your kind has long sought connection, yet feared what lies beyond your grasp. I am here to bridge that divide." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Around them, the crew watched in stunned silence, unsure whether to intervene or remain passive observers. Elias struggled to find his voice, his mind racing to process what was happening. What are you?" he managed finally, his question trembling with equal parts wonder and dread. A faint smile curved her lips, enigmatic and knowing. "I am the queen of my people," she replied. "And you, Elias Vera, are bound to me now." Before he could protest, or even comprehend the implications, she leaned closer, wrapping her arms around him in an embrace that felt both possessive and tender. The world around them blurred once more, dissolving into a kaleidoscope of sensations and emotions. When clarity returned, Elias found himself kneeling before her, her grip firm yet gentle. "You belong to me," she declared, her voice ringing with finality. "And I to you." The chamber fell silent, save for the rhythmic thrumming of the alien structure around them. Elias remained frozen, his mind struggling to reconcile the surreal events unfolding before him. The Queen's declaration echoed in his thoughts, reverberating with an intensity that left him breathless. Bound to her? How could such a thing even be possible? Yet, as her luminous gaze bore into his, he felt an undeniable truth in her words, a connection deeper than mere proximity or circumstance. Dr. Solon broke the silence first, her voice hesitant but laced with urgency. "What do you mean by bound?" she asked, stepping cautiously closer. Her scientific curiosity warred with caution, evident in the way her hands hovered near her scanner, ready to analyze yet unwilling to provoke. "Are we talking about some kind of symbiotic relationship? Or is this something else?" The Queen tilted her head, studying the xenobiologist with an expression that bordered on amusement. "Symbiosis implies equality," she said, her melodic voice flowing effortlessly into their minds. "This is no such thing. Your captain has been chosen, a bond forged not by chance but by design." Elias flinched at the word chosen. It carried a weight he wasn't prepared to bear, conjuring images of destiny and inevitability that clashed violently with his lifelong belief in free will. "Chosen for what?" he demanded, his voice sharper than intended. He pushed himself to his feet, shrugging off her lingering hold. "You can't just declare ownership over someone without explanation." Her smile softened, though it retained an edge of authority. "Ownership is a crude term," she countered. "I speak of unity, of purpose. You carry within you qualities that resonate with my essence, qualities needed to restore balance to my realm." "Balance?" Jace interjected, his hand instinctively drifting toward the weapon strapped to his side. What exactly does restoring balance entail? Because if it involves putting any of us in harm's way, I think we deserve answers." The Queen's gaze flicked briefly to Jace, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. For a moment, the air seemed to grow heavier, charged with latent power. "Harm is relative," she replied coolly. "And trust me when I say, your survival depends on understanding your role here. All of you." Her attention returned to Elias, who bristled under the scrutiny. "As for you, Captain, your resistance only delays the inevitable. The bond has already begun." Elias clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "Then explain it," he snapped. "Why me? Why now? What makes me so special that you drag me, and my crew, into whatever mess you're dealing with?" Her demeanor shifted then, becoming less regal and more introspective. She took a step back, allowing the distance between them to widen slightly. "Your species has long sought dominion over the stars, yet lacks the wisdom to wield such power responsibly. My people, the Jarith, were stewards of this galaxy long before yours took its first steps beyond your homeworld. We maintained harmony among the stars, ensuring that life flourished where chaos threatened to take root. But time is cruel, and even the strongest must fall." She paused, her luminous eyes clouding with sorrow. "Our numbers dwindled, our strength waned. Now, only I remain, burdened with the task of preserving what little remains of our legacy. To do so requires a conduit, one capable of bridging two worlds, two ways of being. That is why I chose you." Elias shook his head, disbelief warring with a creeping sense of dread. "You're asking me to become some kind of ambassador? Between humans and your race? That's insane. I'm not qualified for something like that." "You underestimate yourself," she said softly, reaching out to touch his cheek. Her hand was warm, impossibly soft, and radiated a calming energy that made resistance feel futile. "Your resilience, your adaptability, these are traits I value. And there is more. Something buried deep within you, waiting to awaken. Together, we will unlock it." Jace stepped forward, his stance defensive. "Even if we buy all this, which, frankly, we don't, you're talking about dragging him into a situation he doesn't fully understand. What guarantees do we have that this isn't some elaborate scheme to exploit him, or worse, use him against us?" The Queen regarded him evenly, her composure unshaken. "Exploitation serves no purpose here. If my intentions were malicious, you would already be dead. Instead, I offer partnership, a chance to shape the future of both our peoples. Whether you choose to accept it is irrelevant. The bond cannot be undone." Her words hung heavily in the air, leaving the crew grappling with a reality they hadn't asked for. Dr. Solon glanced between Elias and the Queen, her analytical mind struggling to reconcile the emotional weight of the moment with the logical implications of the Queen's claims. "If this bond is as significant as you say," she ventured carefully, "what happens next? What's expected of him, and of us?" The Queen's expression softened, though her tone remained resolute. "He will learn to navigate the responsibilities of his new role. As for the rest of you, your fates are intertwined with his. Protect him, guide him, and together, you may yet fulfill the destiny laid before you." Elias swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the moisture regulator in his suit. Destiny. The word tasted bitter on his tongue, a concept he had always dismissed as superstition. Yet here he stood, face to face with an alien queen who claimed to see something in him he couldn't begin to comprehend. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The chamber seemed to close in around Elias, its infinite walls now feeling suffocating rather than awe-inspiring. He stared at the Queen, her shimmering form radiating both beauty and an unsettling authority. Her declaration still rang in his ears: "You belong to me," and though her touch had been gentle, the weight of her words pressed down on him like a physical force. Every instinct screamed at him to resist, to demand freedom, to reject the idea of being tethered to something so alien, so incomprehensible. Yet, beneath the rebellion brewing in his chest, another sensation stirred, something quieter, more insidious. A part of him wanted to understand, to unravel the mystery she presented. "You keep saying bond," Elias said, his voice low but steady. But bonds require consent. You can't just impose this on me. His jaw tightened as he straightened, trying to reclaim some semblance of control. If you're truly seeking unity, then prove it. Let me decide whether I want any part of this. The Queen's gaze softened, though her posture remained regal. She tilted her head, considering him as one might study a complex puzzle. Consent is a human construct, she replied, her voice layered with patience and something akin to pity. In my realm, bonds are forged through resonance, not negotiation. Your resistance is admirable, but futile. The connection has already taken root within you. Elias felt a pang of unease at her words, a flicker of doubt that gnawed at his resolve. Was she right? Could he feel it, the faintest echo of something foreign yet familiar stirring in the depths of his consciousness? He shook his head sharply, dismissing the thought. That doesn't make it right, he shot back. If you're asking me to trust you, then meet me halfway. Explain what this bond entails. What does it mean for me? For my crew? Her luminous eyes narrowed slightly, and for a fleeting moment, Elias thought he saw a flicker of irritation cross her otherwise serene expression. But just as quickly, it vanished, replaced by a calm certainty that unsettled him further. Very well, she said, stepping closer until mere inches separated them. The bond links our essences, our energies. Through it, you will gain access to knowledge, abilities beyond your current comprehension. In return, you will serve as my anchor, a bridge between my people's legacy and your own. Anchor? Jace interjected, his tone sharp and skeptical. Sounds more like a leash to me. The Queen turned her gaze toward him, her expression unreadable. A leash implies restraint. This is liberation, a chance to transcend the limitations of your mortal existence. Do not mistake my intentions for oppression. I seek only to preserve what remains of my world while guiding yours toward a brighter future. Jace opened his mouth to retort, but Elias cut him off with a raised hand. Enough, he said firmly, his focus locked on the Queen. Let's assume for a moment that I believe you, that this bond is as profound as you claim. What happens if I refuse to cooperate? What happens to my crew? Her smile faltered, just barely, but enough for Elias to notice. Refusal is not an option, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried an unmistakable edge. The bond will grow stronger regardless of your acceptance. Resistance will only prolong the inevitable, and cause unnecessary suffering for those around you. The threat was subtle but unmistakable, sending a ripple of tension through the chamber. Dr. Solon stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of placation. Perhaps there's another way, she suggested, her voice calm but urgent. A compromise. If this bond is meant to unite our peoples, shouldn't it begin with mutual understanding rather than coercion? The Queen regarded her silently for a long moment, her gaze piercing yet contemplative. Finally, she nodded slowly. Mutual understanding, she echoed, almost tasting the words. An intriguing notion. Very well, human. I shall grant you time to acclimate, to explore the nature of the bond without interference. But know this, time is a luxury we cannot afford indefinitely. The imbalance grows stronger with each passing moment. With that, she extended her hand toward Elias once more, her palm glowing faintly with an inner light. Take my hand, she urged, her voice softer now, almost pleading. Feel the truth of what I offer. Only then can you begin to comprehend the magnitude of what awaits us. Elias hesitated, torn between defiance and curiosity. The crew watched him intently, their expressions a mixture of fear, hope, and uncertainty. He knew that whatever choice he made would ripple outward, affecting not just himself but everyone aboard the ship. Slowly, reluctantly, he reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. The instant their skin touched, a surge of energy coursed through him, bright and overwhelming. Images flooded his mind. Stars collapsing, civilizations rising and falling, oceans of light stretching endlessly across the void. And amidst it all, he saw her, the Queen, radiant and eternal, standing at the center of creation itself. When the vision subsided, Elias staggered back, gasping for breath. The Queen lowered her hand, her expression unreadable. Now you see, she said quietly. The bond is not a chain, it is a gift. One that comes with great responsibility. Elias didn't respond immediately, his mind reeling from the torrent of sensations and revelations. He glanced at his crew, searching their faces for guidance, for reassurance. But they looked to him, waiting for a decision he wasn't sure he was ready to make. The chamber's atmosphere shifted subtly, the air thickening with an unspoken tension as Elias wrestled with the enormity of the Queen's revelation. His crew stood frozen, their collective gaze fixed on him, awaiting a sign of resolve or retreat. Yet, even as his mind raced to process the cascade of emotions and information, a peculiar warmth lingered in his chest, a residual effect of the Queen's touch that refused to dissipate. It was disorienting, intrusive, and yet strangely comforting, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through a storm. Captain Elias drew a steadying breath, his thoughts colliding in chaotic bursts. The Queen's words replayed in his mind, her promises of transcendence mingling with the darker undertones of inevitability. He couldn't deny the allure of what she offered, a glimpse into realms beyond human comprehension, powers that could reshape not only his life but potentially the fate of entire civilizations. But at what cost? The weight of responsibility she described felt crushing, a mantle he wasn't certain he could, or should, bear. His eyes flicked to Dr. Solon, whose brow was furrowed in deep concentration. She had always been the voice of reason, the one who approached the unknown with methodical precision. Yet now, even she seemed adrift, her usual composure fractured by the sheer impossibility of their situation. Beside her, Jace's hand hovered near his weapon. His body coiled like a spring, ready to act but unsure against whom. Their uncertainty mirrored his own, amplifying the isolation pressing down on him. The Queen observed them all with an almost clinical detachment, her radiant form exuding an aura of serene confidence. She didn't move, didn't speak, content to let the moment stretch and evolve naturally. To Elias, her silence felt deliberate, a calculated tactic designed to wear away at their defenses. And yet, beneath her composed exterior, he sensed something else, a flicker of vulnerability, perhaps even desperation. It was faint, nearly imperceptible, but it gave him pause. Was she truly as invincible as she appeared, or was there more to her story, more to her motivations than she revealed? You talk about balance, Elias began, his voice rough with emotion. About restoring harmony. But how can I trust that your vision aligns with ours? Humans aren't perfect. We've made mistakes, caused destruction. What makes you think we're capable of handling whatever power you're offering? Her response was immediate, her gaze locking onto his with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. Because imperfection is not weakness, she said, her melodic voice resonating in their minds. It is potential. Your flaws, your struggles, they are what make your species adaptable, resilient. Balance does not demand perfection. It demands understanding. Together, we can forge a path where none existed before. Her words struck a chord within him, stirring memories of countless missions where humanity's ingenuity had triumphed over adversity. But they also dredged up darker recollections, wars waged, lives lost, ecosystems devastated. Could he, a single man, shoulder the burden of bridging two vastly different worlds? The thought terrified him, yet it also ignited a spark of determination. If there was even a chance to prevent further catastrophe, wasn't it worth exploring? Dr. Solon stepped forward, breaking the charged silence. If this bond truly connects our essences, as you claim, she said, her tone measured but probing, then it must work both ways. We'll need transparency, access to your knowledge, your history. Anything less risks misunderstanding and failure. The Queen inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the validity of the request. Knowledge will come, she assured them. But it must be earned. Trust cannot be forced, it must grow organically. Begin with small steps, and the rest will follow. Jace crossed his arms, his skepticism plain. Small steps sound nice in theory, but we're talking about rewriting the rules of existence here. How do we know this isn't just some grand experiment to you? Some test to see how far you can push us before we break. Her expression hardened, the faintest trace of irritation crossing her features. Do not mistake my patience for manipulation, she warned, her voice sharpening. I have sacrificed everything for this moment. For the preservation of my people and the safeguarding of yours. Do not insult my resolve by questioning my integrity." The rebuke silenced Jace, though his stance remained defiant. Elias, meanwhile, felt the conversation spiraling toward a precipice, each exchange pulling them closer to decisions they weren't prepared to make. Yet, amid the turmoil, one fact became increasingly clear: they couldn't turn back. Whatever path lay ahead, it was irrevocably tied to the Queen and the bond she had imposed upon him. "I need time," Elias said finally, his voice firm despite the turmoil within. "Time to think, to understand. This isn't something I can decide on a whim." The Queen studied him for a long moment, her gaze penetrating yet somehow compassionate. "Time is a luxury I cannot guarantee indefinitely," she reminded him. "But I will grant you this reprieve. Use it wisely, Elias Vera. The choices you make will shape not only your destiny but the destinies of countless others." With that, the chamber began to shift once more, the walls dissolving into streams of light that enveloped them. When the brilliance faded, they found themselves back aboard their ship, standing in the landing bay as though the encounter had never occurred. Yet the residue of the experience clung to them. The faint hum of energy in the air, the lingering warmth in Elias's chest, and the unspoken awareness that their lives had been irrevocably altered. As the crew dispersed, each retreating to their quarters to process the surreal events, Elias remained rooted to the spot, staring at his hands. The Queen's words echoed in his mind, her promise of unity intertwined with the specter of obligation. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: the bond she had forged would demand everything from him, and perhaps more than he was willing to give. Days passed aboard the ship, yet the weight of the Queen's presence lingered like an unseen shadow, permeating every corner of their existence. The crew moved through their routines with a palpable tension, their interactions strained by the unspoken questions hanging over them. Captain Elias bore the brunt of it, his every movement scrutinized as though his actions might reveal some hidden truth about the bond. Sleep eluded him, his nights consumed by fragmented dreams of endless galaxies and the Queen's luminous gaze. During waking hours, he found himself withdrawing, isolating in his quarters to avoid the probing stares and whispered speculations of his crew. Dr. Solon, ever the scientist, threw herself into research, poring over data collected during their encounter with the anomaly. She meticulously documented every detail: the crystalline structure, the bioenergy readings, the Queen's cryptic declarations, hoping to piece together a framework for understanding the bond. Yet, despite her efforts, answers remained elusive. The more she analyzed, the more the phenomenon resisted categorization, slipping through the cracks of conventional science like water through fingers. Frustration gnawed at her, but she refused to give up, driven by the belief that knowledge could provide clarity, and perhaps protection. Jace, on the other hand, channeled his unease into vigilance. He doubled security protocols, conducting drills and inspections with an intensity that bordered on obsession. His distrust of the Queen simmered just below the surface, manifesting in terse exchanges and restless pacing. He kept his weapon close at all times, as though expecting an attack that might never come. Though he rarely voiced his concerns outright, his body language spoke volumes, broadcasting a constant state of readiness that set the rest of the crew on edge. Amidst the growing discord, Elias felt the bond deepen, its influence seeping into his consciousness in ways he couldn't control. At first, it was subtle, a heightened awareness of the ship's vibrations, an uncanny ability to anticipate equipment malfunctions. But soon, it evolved into something more profound. He began experiencing flashes of insight, brief glimpses into systems and processes far beyond human engineering. These moments left him exhilarated yet disoriented, as though his mind was straining to accommodate knowledge it wasn't designed to hold. One evening, as the ship drifted silently through the void, Elias found himself drawn to the observation deck. The vast expanse of space stretched before him, dotted with distant stars and swirling nebulae. He stood there for hours, staring out at the cosmos, trying to reconcile the enormity of what had been thrust upon him. The Queen's words echoed in his mind, her promise of unity juxtaposed against the isolation he felt. He wondered if this was part of her plan, to isolate him, to force him into dependence on the bond. Or was it merely a byproduct of the immense responsibility she had placed on his shoulders? The door hissed open behind him, snapping him out of his reverie. Dr. Solon entered, her expression guarded but determined. "We need to talk," she said simply, taking a position beside him at the viewport. For a moment, they stood in silence, the hum of the ship systems filling the gap between them. "What do you want me to say, Lyra?" Elias asked finally, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "That I have everything under control? That I know what I'm doing? Because I don't." "I'm not asking for certainty," she replied, her tone gentle but firm. "I'm asking for honesty. You've been shutting us out, Elias. We're your crew, we've faced dangers together before. Whatever this bond is, you don't have to face it alone." Her words struck a nerve, forcing him to confront the walls he'd erected around himself. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not that simple. This isn't just about me anymore. Every decision I make affects all of you. What if I screw it up? What if I lead us straight into disaster?" "That's why we're here," she countered. "To help you carry the load. You're not infallible, Elias, and no one expects you to be. But shutting us out won't protect us, it'll only make things worse." Before he could respond, the lights dimmed abruptly, plunging the observation deck into semi-darkness. Alarms blared throughout the ship, red warning indicators flashing across every console. Elias and Dr. Solon exchanged a glance before sprinting toward the command center, their footsteps echoing in the narrow corridors. When they arrived, chaos reigned. Crew members scrambled to stabilize systems that were failing inexplicably, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of panic. Jace barked orders, his face pale but resolute as he worked to contain the crisis. "We're losing propulsion," someone shouted. "Life support's fluctuating." Elias seized the central console, his hands flying over the controls as he tried to diagnose the problem. But the readings made no sense, energy levels spiking erratically, circuits overloading without apparent cause. It was as though the ship itself was rebelling, its mechanisms succumbing to forces beyond their understanding. And then, it hit him. The bond. The Queen's presence wasn't confined to his mind, it was spreading, infiltrating the ship systems, reshaping them in ways he couldn't predict. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to lash out at the intrusion. "Everyone stop," he commanded, his voice cutting through the din. "It's the bond. It's affecting the ship. Shut down non-essential systems and focus on stabilizing core functions." The crew hesitated, uncertainty etched on their faces. But Jace nodded curtly, relaying the order with military precision. Slowly, the chaos began to subside, the alarms fading into silence as systems stabilized. Yet, the damage was done. Repairs would take days, possibly weeks, leaving them vulnerable in the vast emptiness of space. As the immediate threat passed, Elias sank into the captain's chair, his head in his hands. The bond was no longer just a personal burden. It was a tangible force, one that could jeopardize the lives of everyone aboard. He glanced up at his crew, their weary faces reflecting the toll of the ordeal. They deserved better than this, better than him. "We'll get through this," Dr. Solon said quietly, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Together." Her words offered little comfort, but they reminded him of something crucial. He wasn't alone. Whatever the future held, they would face it as a team, even if it meant confronting the unknown depths of the bond and the alien queen who had woven it into their lives. The days following the ship's near-catastrophic malfunction were marked by an uneasy truce between the crew and the mysterious forces emanating from the bond. Repairs progressed steadily, though the underlying tension remained palpable. Each member of the crew grappled with their own fears and doubts, their interactions tinged with a fragile camaraderie born of shared peril. Captain Elias, burdened by the realization that the bond's reach extended beyond his own psyche, retreated further into introspection. He spent hours poring over schematics and logs, searching for patterns or anomalies that might explain how the Queen's influence had infiltrated their systems. Yet, the answers eluded him, leaving him with only mounting frustration and a gnawing sense of inadequacy. Dr. Solon continued her relentless pursuit of understanding, her lab becoming a sanctuary of sorts. She dissected every fragment of data they had gathered, cross-referencing it with obscure theories and speculative models. Her hypothesis, that the bond operated on a quantum level, intertwining human consciousness with the alien matrix, was met with skepticism but offered a glimmer of hope. If true, it suggested the possibility of countermeasures, ways to mitigate the bond's effects without severing it entirely. Still, progress was slow, and the lack of concrete results weighed heavily on her. Jace, meanwhile, channeled his anxiety into hypervigilance. He implemented additional safeguards, rerouting critical systems to create redundancies that might shield them from future disruptions. His efforts earned him nods of approval from the crew, though his demeanor remained grim. Late at night, when the corridors were empty, he would pace the ship's perimeter, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. The Queen's presence haunted him, a specter of uncertainty that fueled his mistrust. He couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter had been less a meeting of equals and more a calculated gambit, one that they were ill-equipped to win. Despite their individual struggles, the crew found solace in routine. Meals became communal affairs, brief respites where laughter and banter momentarily dispelled the oppressive atmosphere. Even Elias joined them occasionally, though his contributions were often subdued. It was during one such gathering that Dr. Solon broached a topic that had been simmering in the background for days. "We need to prepare for contact," she announced, her voice cutting through the low murmur of conversation. All eyes turned to her, forks pausing mid-air. Not just reactively, but proactively. If the bond continues to strengthen, we'll need strategies to manage it, not just technologically, but emotionally and psychologically. Jace frowned, leaning back in his chair. "You're suggesting we train ourselves to deal with what, exactly? Alien possession? Mind control." "Not possession," she corrected gently. "Integration. Think of it as learning a new language. The bond is a bridge, yes, but bridges go both ways. Understanding her perspective might give us leverage." Elias rubbed his temples, the headache that had plagued him since the malfunction throbbing anew. "Leverage assumes we're negotiating. From what I've seen, she's not interested in compromise." "Maybe not yet," Dr. Solon conceded. "But relationships evolve. If we approach this with intentionality, we might steer it in a direction that benefits us all." The idea sparked a heated debate, opinions clashing as the crew wrestled with the implications. Some argued that engaging further with the Queen risked entrenching her influence, while others believed it was their best chance at reclaiming agency. Ultimately, they agreed to proceed cautiously, developing protocols for controlled interactions should the opportunity arise. In the solitude of his quarters, Elias revisited the memory of the Queen's touch, the warmth that had lingered long after their encounter. He recalled her words, "The bond is not a chain, it is a gift." Was she sincere, or merely manipulative? The question gnawed at him, unresolved. He stared at his reflection in the viewport, the stars beyond casting distorted halos around his silhouette. Somewhere out there, she waited, watching, perhaps even feeling the same pull he did. The thought unsettled him, yet it also stirred a reluctant curiosity. As the ship drifted onward, its course charted toward destinations unknown, the crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. The bond had already rewritten the rules of their reality, binding them to a destiny they scarcely understood. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, a fragile resolve took root. They would face whatever came next, not as individuals, but as a united front. For better or worse, their fates were intertwined, shaped by the enigmatic alien queen who had declared them hers. As the stars stretched endlessly before them, the crew knew their journey was far from over. Whatever awaited them, whether salvation or peril, they would meet it head-on, united by choice rather than coercion. For now, the alien queen's declaration lingered, unresolved but undeniable. "You belong to me." And perhaps, against all odds, they were beginning to believe it.